Winter's coming, Icewind Dale is here, and Halloween is just around the corner. What a perfect time to increase the tension at your table with some Dungeons & Dragons horror tips. And this isn't just for Icewind Dale, you can use this for any one-shot or story arc that you really want to put some fear in the hearts of those players. But these will be especially useful for Rime of the Frostmaiden since the entire module dials up the isolation and horror themes. So I'm here to show you how to increase that frigid immersion at your table. But if you want to stay warm in these sub-zero temperatures, then you gotta subscribe. And I looked at my data recently, and 60% of you guys are alone out there in the cold, which means if those people did click that little red button, we'd be at over 16,000 subscribers. So if you want some more frosty tips, or I've already helped you in some way with your D&D game, then think about subscribing. It really does help me out. In this video, I'm gonna go over tips for your session sub-zero. See? Sub-zero. I'll be talking about all the different horror type things, along with a ton of player tips, DM tips, like taking monsters and making them truly horrifying. And for the big finale, I'm going to give you 2 examples of descriptions for a horrible description and a true horror description. If you look at the video, it should have different bars along the bottom to show you the different categories of this video if you want to jump around. And now, let's roll it. So you're about to start an Icewind Dale campaign, or you want to do a fun Halloween one-shot. The first D&D horror DM tip is session sub-zero. Well, you need to get on the same page as your players before you dive into horror. Normally, D&D is a story of heroic adventurers saving the day. This is totally different than that. Yeah, they might save the day, but man, are they gonna have to go through some stuff to be able to do it. And some of that stuff can make players uncomfortable, which is the last thing you want. So you really need to know what types of horror they're okay with and that they want in their D&D campaign. Now, if your group wants to run a game like this, they're literally asking for this type of game, but you need to know what their boundaries are and you know what they're comfortable with so that you know how to make them uncomfortable. And speaking of uncomfortable, let's get into the second horror tip about all the different horror themes. So first off here, whether you're running a one-shot or a story arc that you want to be really suspenseful, or an entire Icewind Dale campaign, you cannot have your players feel like confident, powerful heroes. This undermines the concept of horror entirely, and it's really hard for your players to be afraid of anything if they're so confident. So what should they feel besides cold? No, and I mean like it's really cold. So here's a quick rundown of these horror themes and how you can make your players feel this way. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything or how you would do it. First up is hopeless. Make them feel overwhelmed and that nothing's going their way and that the odds are completely stacked against them. Next is claustrophobic or anxious. Make them feel cornered, trapped, or confined with feeling that they need to escape. Or you can do this by making them feel hunted, that something's following them. Then you have paranoid. Danger could be anywhere and nowhere is safe. Can you even trust anyone outside your party? For creepy, put things in your game that are just a little off, a little random, or just a little weird that make the players feel uneasy, uncomfortable, or suspicious. Which leads me to doubt. This is the opposite of confidence, and your players need to be unsure of things. And you can kind of see how all these things kind of tie in together. And the DM should say certain things like maybe, perhaps, or possibly. Disgust is when you describe things that are gross or nasty, but I caution you, use this sparingly, because if you overdo this too much, then your players will just get numb to all this gross stuff and it'll lose its effect. And then there's dread, and this is huge and it can be very difficult to pull off. You can't have players feel dread in one moment. It comes from a slow, steady ramp up of tension that usually comes from fear of the unknown. This is the true horror aspect of the game. Using everything I've said before and I'm about to go into more DM tips on, how can you grow this unpredictable, uncomfortable uncertainty into this final theme? Terror. This is the thing that sends chills down your spine the moment that players realize the shock and awe of something terrible that's happened that's been building up for a surprise reveal. This is the holy grail of a horror game and something that you might not even be able to accomplish in a horror-themed D&D game, but I got a lot of tips coming at you now to be able to pull this off, especially in your Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden game. Those players will be shaking in their snow boots. Chill out. I gotta know, do you guys want more of this Icewind Dale stuff from me? I got a lot of videos coming out soon, but I wanted to stop and make some Icewind Dale stuff because you guys really got me excited about it. I have a huge video from the most requested thing from the over 300 comments I got in my Icewind Dale hot take. I'm going to be introducing multiple homebrew mechanics of mine that I've made from scratch just for Icewind Dale and other homebrews of how I would homebrew this game. I'm going to be going next level with some homebrews to make it truly feel cold, because the current system really doesn't do that. New weather systems, blizzard, avalanches, different cold gear that you can wear and acquire, travel, rest, survival, and different mechanics to dial up the horror in your game. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and you don't miss out. And if this video gets over 600 likes, I'll make another Rime of the Frostmaiden video. So leave a comment on what you want to see and I'll put it in the poll. North Pole. Let's get back to it. These next tips are on how to evoke emotion, use horror monsters, and handle those players. Make sure you cover a wide spectrum of emotions to feel everything and not be too one-dimensional on horror and be too serious.
Why so serious?
If everything is always scary or sad, then it loses its punch when you actually want things to be scary, because things are always scary. Basically what I'm saying is don't beat your players over the head with this horror, gloom, and doom theme too much, because it can really wear them down. Make sure there are happy moments or humorous moments that we'll talk about more in a second. So how can you make players feel these emotions if they currently aren't? NPCs can help set the emotional tone or change it from one state to another. Have a frantic NPC rush into the tavern, collapse to the ground as something bursts out of their chest, and everyone screams and runs. Or have a humorous NPC to break the tension sometimes if things are getting a bit too tense. But be careful, because too much humor can sabotage all this hard work you've done at building up this tension. Another tip here challenges those players. Allow for them to role play their trauma or fear. Ask leading questions to them to let them be in control of their emotional state. Sure, you can make them have a wisdom saving throw for fear, but have them role play that fear. Maybe they want to roleplay that fear as lack of confidence or uncertainty. And speaking of players, we need to establish some ground rules for this horror game at your table. There needs to be a certain mood or understanding about this horror genre, because any type of ridiculousness can snap you right out of it. Let's say you've been busting your butt as a DM and you've been really working on these descriptions that we're going to talk about here in a second, and the tension's building, that final creature is about to be revealed. The players are sitting there at the table, white knuckles. Then one of the players cracks a funny joke. And all that tension's literally gone. You can't get it back. Now, don't get me wrong, I love humor, but make sure you find the right places for it, both as a DM and the player. You don't want to sabotage this feeling of tension that's been built up over time. But I got you DMs out there covered. Send this timestamp of this next section to your players and let them watch it. I'm gonna talk to them for you. All right, players, huddle up. We're working hard here with some DM tips to take this game and make it truly terrifying. As a player, you need to play into this type of game. Allow yourself to be immersed. Allow yourself to be afraid. Roleplay how your character feels, because some of the stuff that your DM's gonna throw at you should be terrifying. And maybe your character would do things that might not be tactically optimal. And you're asking for this horror genre in the first place, so just go with it. Play into that tension the DM's building up, or dial it up a notch. The other players at the table will feel your energy as one of them. So do things you think your character might do in a state of fear. Now, I'm not saying you always have to play a scared character, but make sure you still have respect for what that beast is. Help keep things going and don't break the tension at that key moment that your DM has worked so hard to build up for you guys. So now we're going to talk about how to kill all your players in one encounter. Gotcha. Time out. Before I get into the descriptions, which is a huge part of horror, I need to thank my patrons, who are a huge part of how I can do what I do here. If it wasn't from the support that I get over on Patreon, I would have had to already have gone down to only being able to post once every 2 weeks. But with all the support I've gotten, I've been able to stay strong at those weekly Sunday videos. And with these future patron goals, I plan on unlocking even more homebrew content. I also just started a dungeon company to be able to make even more stuff for you guys. Because like I've always said, the money I get from Patreon, I put right back into the channel. In fact, I'm looking right now to hire a video editor. So if you got some editing skills, join over on Discord and send me a DM. So again, thank you so much to everyone in this community who's helped me out so much. Now let's get into those descriptions. Most people say for good descriptions, read a lot of books. Well, I don't. So I really struggled with this here in the past. Before you start to describe something really important, have a little cheat sheet written down with some key words to spice things up. I do want you to try and riff and freestyle it, but at least you have this list to fall back on. And metaphors can help here too, convey what you're trying to say without repeating the same phrase over and over. And if you want to change the mood and go to a more horror setting, then really slow down your speech and the way you talk. Don't go over the top with it, but definitely shift your tone. Don't rush to say things too fast, and maybe insert some pauses. So then if you do start to speak more fast and frantic, they'll feel it better. And this might be the biggest tip here, but make sure to touch on all the senses. Make sure you describe more than what they just see. Now, taste can be a hard sense to do, but what do they smell, hear, and feel? And when I say feel, I mean this in both ways. Physically feel something and emotionally. My last description tip here is to foreshadow scary things. This could be weird things about things that they do see, or an absence of something normal that they don't see. Maybe your players go to a farm at night, but there's no animals. Or maybe those animals are there, but they're all staring straight at the players with their head moving as they walk. And now these are the centerpiece to those D&D horror games. I'm going to throw some quick tips at you, then I got those 2 example descriptions. Horror is based on tension. The anticipation of the monster is scarier than the actual monster itself will be. Don't let the players see the monster too soon. They should see the effects of it, what it leaves behind. Let them hear or see glimpses of it multiple times as it builds up to the big reveal at the very end. Because when something is unknown, your players will fill in those gaps with their own minds, and what they come up with will probably be far scarier than what it actually is. And on that, make sure you listen to those players and what they're saying, and maybe add the cool stuff that's really scary on top of the monster. Add twists to your monsters, and I mean this in 2 ways. I mean it as a plot twist where something doesn't appear as it seems, and twist it by adding some weird, creepy effects to your monsters. Twist or gnarl one subtle thing. Maybe one of its antlers is sideways on its head. Maybe the wolves attacking the party's hair is constantly falling out. Have your players discover strange things, whether it's with monsters or what they find in their lair. They're just a little bit off and don't make total sense. And this hits back on that uncertainty or paranoia that we talked about earlier. And I love this too. Have the monster do something that has a human characteristic to it that shows it has intelligence. Maybe it collects things or displays things or has some level of speech. Maybe they can employ tricky tactics like a bait and switch or something else that can give them a serial killer vibe. Or if you want to be really creepy, especially to some people, give your monsters childlike features. Ugh. Okay, let's talk about combat now. They need to respect this monster that you're throwing down, and they need to understand that this is serious business. Show displays of power of this creature doing something that's crazy strong. Maybe they don't see it exactly like we talked about earlier, but they hear stories of what it can do. And once combat finally happens with this thing that you've hyped up, maybe over multiple sessions, it should be deadly. In fact, if I was running a campaign like this, most combats that my players would encounter would just be deadly. You know, trying to establish all those themes. But if you want to try and make next level DM moves and throw a creature at your player that's so deadly that they'd have no chance and they have to run, make sure that they know and have been given many clues or straight up told them that this thing will destroy you and you have no chance to survive, and this whole thing now is getting away from this thing. Because man, sometimes players just don't get the hint. 2 really good tips here come from Professor Dungeon Master over at Dungeon Craft, and he says that if you want the players to truly fear something, 1, it cannot die in the first round, and 2, there must be a chance that a PC could go down in 1 hit from this thing. Or I guess in 1 round if it has multiple attacks. Now don't worry, I will have full videos in the next 2 weeks about monster mechanics and how to create and add homebrews to those monsters to make them truly terrifying. Okay, here it is. I'm going to give you a very basic description that is very to the point. Look for windows when I'm saying this on things that you could add from what we just talked about. Then after, I'm going to show you what the same description sounds like when you put everything we just said into practice. And if you want to pitch this to your friends and want to run Icewind Dale or some other horror game, send this clip to your players so they can get a taste of it. And make sure you pay attention to all the small stuff too, because I'll be including those extra twists to take that monster and make it more horrific. Here we go. The cold snow clears as you see the opening to the cave. You enter, but it gets even colder. You see ice on the sides of the cave walls as you make your way further in. You see dead creatures on the cold floor and 1 frozen in ice. You finally make your way through all these tunnels to a cross section of the cave with multiple openings, and in the center of it is a dead body. You walk up to it and you hold your torch up, and at that moment a strong breeze puts out your torch and everything goes dark. What do? The winds howl, but as you peer through the blizzard, you can barely see the opening to the lair of this creature that you've been hunting. You trudge forward, the snow still sticking to your face. The wind stops as you enter this cave, but it's strange. Inside, you actually feel even colder. The walls of this cave seem to be covered with a thick sheet of ice that shimmers like glass and reflects the light of your single torch. You can only see about 30 or 40 feet in front of you at most, but you see a pool of thick liquid at your feet that trails off deeper into the tunnel. You hear a deep bellow that could be a growl or just the wind. As you push deeper and deeper, you can feel the sweat on your body start to crystallize into frost. You look around and come across a creature that looks to be stuck in a wall, frozen in place. Its hands outstretched in front of it like it's trying to protect itself from something. As you get closer, you see that same purple slime now smeared along the walls, leading off and to the left. You smell a sour, rancid stench that starts to get stronger and stronger as the air gets colder and colder. As you continue to track down this monster's trail, you see a section of thick ice that's been cleanly sliced through like butter. there's a severed lower half of what looks to be a deer trapped in the ice. You hear the same deep bellow, but this time with a subtle breeze coming from it a little further in. You're continuing with your torch barely being enough light as your skin feels like it's about to crack. You follow this purple liquid trail through the icy tunnels that barely open up into a small structure with multiple openings shooting out in all directions like the spokes of a wheel. In the center of this formation lies a body, but this time a human body. It's lying in a pool of this stuff, motionless, and as you hold your torch out, you see that the corpse is perfectly intact, apart from one single large laceration across its face that seems to be carved into some sort of smile. Disturbing, but you hold your torch even higher to see that this purple blood is smeared into the shape of an X directly below you, almost as if you've been led here to this exact spot on purpose. You feel a strong gust of air with that same foul stench sweep through the tunnels and blow out the light from your torch. As you and your party now stand there in complete darkness, all you hear is that same deep bellow, but this time you can barely make out words. Feed me. What do you do? Okay, so first of all, let me just say I'm not a pro at this, and I had the advantage of typing this all up beforehand. But that's also kind of my tip from earlier. Have a little cheat sheet and maybe some flavored text to be able to help you along. I hope you guys saw all the different things we talked about weaved into this one description. And whenever you go live with this thing, don't try and do all of them at once. Focus on one or two parts of what you really want to do and make sure you do that. And then you can build on this session after session. Because if you try and go too far outside your comfort zone, then you'll just be uncomfortable and nervous, and then your players are the ones that should be nervous, not you. And as you can also see, I added in foreshadowing of some mechanics that might be in that fight and a twist to the monster's behavior to make it more intelligent. And those twisted traits are revealed to the players at a time when it's too late to do anything about it. And as you just saw, they haven't even seen this thing yet. All this work to build up tension is done before the players ever see this monster. So I hope this helps show you guys all those different things we talked about to put into practice in one description. Time out. Whew, things are getting too scary. Esper the Bard is another D&D YouTuber, and I watched his channel for years before I started my own. He's been a huge inspiration for me, and now that I'm doing this YouTube stuff, I was actually able to reach out and talk with him, and he has a new Kickstarter that's starting. I wanted to share this with you guys because I think this book is going to be a next level D&D resource. It has a brand new class in it called the Paragon with multiple subclasses that's basically like a Greek warrior, infused with the power of the gods. The book's also going to have a ton of spells, magic items, and monsters. And another thing he's putting in here that I think's really awesome is a section for DM tips. Now don't get me wrong, the Dungeon Master's Guide's cool and all, but I really do think there's a lot of gaps that this thing can fill. So a link to his limited time Kickstarter will be down below zero. Get it? Because Icewind Dale? Cold? Okay, let's get back to the scary stuff. So now we're going into overtime with some final horror tips for your game and a cool announcement. So if you're going to be taking this game to the next level and including all the senses to immerse your players with, why not include the real world senses too? This is for both an in-person game and online. Use music, and when I say music, I mean more ambiance and creepy music and maybe some sound effects. I'm sure whenever I edit this video, I'm going to put some really spooky music over that description because it really does take it to the next level. Another thing I did in that description that you may or may not have noticed is I actually dimmed down my lighting just a little bit. You don't want it so dark the players can't see the dang minis, but there definitely should be a little bit different vibe than what would be normal. And maybe for Icewind Dale, you secretly turn down the AC a little bit and make it just a little cold on them. So as you can tell, apparently I have a lot to say on this, so I'm going to rapid fire these last ones. But make sure you have stakes in some way so that they know what they're about to lose. Whether it's the loss of their own life or another NPC's life or maybe the safety of a town or something. Make sure they know what's at stake so when it's threatened, they really feel it. And sometimes I talk to them as the DM about what the stakes are. Whenever things are really looking dire and things are looking grim, I might tell them, if this roll doesn't go this certain way, this character will die. I know that's a bit extreme, but you get the idea. And this one could be a whole video, but I really wanted to say this right now, is don't get too roll heavy when things are building up the tension and things are going on. The thing that will kill tension at the table is asking for rolls all the time, and then they're rolling and looking at modify, and then the tension just starts to drop. So let things kind of happen, and if you need a roll to happen, then sure, ask for a roll, but just go easy on the rolls. And the last tip is don't go for jump scares. Because man, they really just don't work, because you're sitting in a comfy place, and there's like, ah! Did that work? Probably not, because in real life, you're sitting in probably a pretty comfortable place right now. So I really wouldn't go for the jump scare, because if it fails, then you could lose tension too. Boo! Man, this might be my longest video yet, but I gotta give this to you. I'm trying to give you guys resources to do what you want to do. And I know my role, I'm the homebrew guy, but I want to bring in 2 other persons to make a 3-person, 3 musketeers of D&D. I'm trying to give you guys all the tools at your disposal to be able to do what you want to do with your game. And I know my role in this, I'm the homebrew guy. So I'm bringing in 2 other people here as resources for y'all to be able to run your Icewind Dale game or any other module. I've done collaborations with both these guys and they're super awesome dudes. Lunch Break Hero is the best in the business at fixing modules, especially when it comes to story and plot points. He has truly taken Curse of Strahd to the next level, and he's about to do the same thing with Icewind Dale. And you got Bob the World Builder with his next level DM prep guys that he's already done a full series for the Dragon of Icespire Peak. He's already on the ball with multiple DM prep guides. He's going to take you through the entire thing to get those DMs ready. So with our powers combined, you got Lunch Break Heroes for those story and plot point fixes, Bob the World Builder to get prepared for everything, and then you got me for those crazy homebrews. And stay tuned for some more big stuff coming as we approach that 10K subscriber goal and the other goal that I have over on Patreon. So until next time, stay creative and think outside the box.